another joke with you guys do it well. I'm a little sad. It's fine. I'll get over it.
All right. Hey, raise your hand if you're uncomfortable right now because you're staring at someone across the room.
No, dude.
If you're not, then I want you to find someone and stare at them across the room and make them uncomfortable. All right? Because this is what we're about. Hey, here's the deal. I don't know if you walked in here and you saw all the chairs all clean lights set up in front, you know, where there's a speaker in the front of the room, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is like church, like I expected it. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, that is not how I roll. That is not how I believe tonight is going to go. So just like this right here, this is disruption. That's what we're about right now, okay? We're going to talk about a holy disruption here in a moment, and this is just the start of it. By the way, this wasn't planned, so thank you, Ritchie and Sarah, for carrying this out. Let's give it up for them. All right, so to get started, I'll start with my name. My name is Austin. All right, I am a youth pastor over at Heights Church. I have been in Prescott for 24 years. Hey, that better be a good one. Okay, let's not go past that. I've been here for a very, very long time. I've grown up here. I love it here. So now here's the question, or here's the thing: is I will give anyone an opportunity to ask me one question. All right, one question. I'll answer that question to the best of my ability. So who's got? It can be a dumb question. It can be a serious question. It can be whatever you want. But one question. All right. I'm not sorry, Olivia. You can't call me. Yes. How many toes? Gosh, that is honestly. I love that you wasted your question on that question. That's my favorite part. I do have 10 toes as a normal human being. I would show you right now, but I don't want to make the people right here uncomfortable. They're like, no, those dogs got to stay in. I get it. Don't worry. Okay. That was it. That was the one question. Sorry. Maybe if you see me later, you can ask me another question. Okay, so what is this workshop about? Does anybody know, or did you just randomly show up? Raise your hand. Someone tell me what this workshop is about. How to spread the gospel to your friends. What do we call that? There's a fancy church term. What is that called? Evangelism. Perfect. So we're talking about this big word, evangelism, and here's what I love about the Bible. And here's what I love about talking about the Bible is that we actually we make these cool big church theological words about specific things. But what I love is I love to break them down and just make them real. Because how many of you right now feel totally comfortable telling a complete stranger the gospel message? Just raise your hand. It's okay. You know what? It's not prideful if you raise your hand. I love it. Okay? Now the rest of you maybe you're half comfortable. Maybe if you knew them a little bit better. Or maybe if you were with someone, would you feel a little more comfortable? If you're with someone. All right? Now, just out of honesty, how many of you are not comfortable at all about sharing the Bible with someone that you don't know? There's a lot of you who have not raised your hands right now. God is watching. That's all I'm saying. Okay, so here's what the goal is. So I'm going to speak for just a few minutes, and then we're going to have Sarah and Ritchie. We're going to do this panel where you guys can ask questions. Sarah's going to ask questions as well to us. But here's what I want to lay out. So just something super, super simple is this idea of evangelism. And in order to understand evangelism, we have to understand what is the gospel. Can someone tell me what is the gospel? Someone raise your hand and tell me, what is the gospel? Yeah.
The good news about Jesus Christ. He came, he lived, he died, he rose. He gets us home.
Perfect. I love that. That's an excellent 15-second gospel presentation right there. Okay, so that's awesome. Now, you go and tell someone that. How many of you guys are terrified if they ask you a question about the Bible? If you just told them, like you read something, you rehearsed it, you're like, I'm going to tell them the gospel, which is totally fine, by the way. You can memorize like how to tell them just like that. I love that. Now, you tell them, now how many of you are actually terrified if they ask you a question back? Like, what if you don't know the answer? Oh my gosh, what if you don't know the actual answer? That's crazy, right? But here's what I want you to understand right now is it's okay to not have all the answers. It's actually okay to stand up for your faith, to talk to people about what you believe and actually say, I don't know. Imagine that. Imagine being comfortable enough to walk up to someone and be like, hey, I love Jesus, this is why I love Jesus. And they ask this hard theological question, you're like, man, I'm not really sure. That's okay. You know why? Because God is big enough to actually spread the gospel through you without you knowing all the answers, because God is God and you are not. And so let me tell you a little bit about myself. As I said, I grew up here. I grew up in the church. All right, I grew up in just church since I was born. And so I grew up being a very, very, very good churchgoer. All right, I went to youth group when I started in middle school. When I was in 6th grade, I went to youth group every single Wednesday night. And I showed up every single Sunday because that's what my parents did. And then I was very good at putting on a face. I would be in school. I went to a public middle school, and I would be one person there. And then I went to church, and then I would be this incredibly awesome, good person at church. And then I would just go back to my old self when I was in middle school. I lived this life for a long time. It wasn't until I got into high school that God got a hold of my heart, and I gave my life to Him my freshman year of high school. But here's the deal, is I was a church kid for my entire life, and it wasn't until I was a freshman that I was actually saved that I go, God, I need you in my life, and I need your love in my life. So that's me, freshman in high school, give my life to Jesus. And so now, what does church look like? I can't be the same person. Well, I would love to tell you instantly I became this awesome person everywhere I went, but that's not true, because I still have this, what we call our flesh, on that I had to deal with, right? Jesus saved me. I'm saved. I'm going to spend eternity with Him, but now I'm still living the same way. How do I reconcile that? So it took years for me to actually implement the way of Jesus in my life to where other people could see it. It wasn't this magical, like, man, next day I'm glowing, like Moses walking off the mountain, I'm glowing, and everyone's like, man, he got saved last night. It wasn't until years later, towards the end of high school, that I was starting to actually live the way God wanted me to live in all areas of my life, not just when I showed up to church, not just when I showed up to something like this. And so, now, carrying that on, several years later, I knew God wanted me to go into ministry. I knew that I needed to go to school for that. And so I went to college, got my degree, and then starting youth ministry. I've been at Heights for about 16 years. I've been working there for 13 of those 16 years. And so I started doing like full-time youth ministry once I graduated from college, got my bachelor's degree. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, perfect. I'm doing exactly what God wants me to do. Now fast forward 5 years doing full-time youth ministry, all right, whether it was the preteen ministry, whether it was middle school ministry, or whether it was high school ministry. Fast forward now to about a year ago, which is not that long ago, by the way. A year ago, I found that, man, I was really good at working for God. But I was really, really awful at being in a relationship with God. Because I was really good at making God my job, and not my passion, not my relationship. See, I was actually more of a co-worker with God than I was a son of God. And see, that's freaky, like, for me to say, because here I am, like, professional in ministry, someone who's supposed to have all the answers, but I'm standing here right now and I'm telling you, I didn't actually learn truly what it's like to be a child of God, like, fully where I can walk every single day and go, man, I know God loves me, where I can go, man, it's not about how much I do for Him, it's about how much I'm with Him, right? There's a huge difference. It went from that. And this was just about a year ago, because there was a lot of things in my life that spiraled out of control, because I'm someone who loves competition. I love to be efficient with my life. I love to pack all my days as tight as I can. And then about a year ago, everything unraveled for me, and I started to spiral out of control. I started to get burnt out, and I started to go, God, I don't think this life is for me anymore. And so what happened was, God used all of this turmoil in my life to capture my heart and go, can you just sit still long enough and be a child? Can you just sit still long enough and just be okay with being in a relationship with me? It's not about the trophies you accumulate. It's not about what you can do for me. It's not about all of the things you can check off for me. It's about just being with me. And so this verse, it's in Ephesians. It's Ephesians chapter 5, right? And so we don't have time to read all of it. It really starts in 4 verse 17, right? Chapter 4 verse 17. But here's what's interesting. It's chapter 5 verse 1. It says, follow God's example, therefore, as dearly loved children. My question for you tonight is, do you find yourself as a dearly loved child of God? Or do you find yourself stuck in the never-ending chaos of just trying to do all the good things for Him? Showing up to something like this. Perfect. Check. I got it. Going home, saying one prayer before you go to bed. Perfect. Got it. I'm on track. Waking up tomorrow morning and coming here instead of doing something else, anything else on a Saturday morning or sleeping in. Oh man, I'm doing really awesome for God. Going to summer camp in the summer, right? Going to summer camp with my youth group, and I'm doing really awesome when I could be going somewhere else, hanging out with friends. I'm gonna go to church camp. Awesome, check, I got that. Man, I reached out and I talked to one person about God. Perfect, I got that off the list. Oh, good, we can just keep moving on. How much of your life has just become a list of just things to do for God? My question is, do you find yourself, when I read this, it's so peaceful, because it's follow God's example, therefore, as dearly loved. Do you find yourself dearly loved, or are you just striving for His love every single day? Because I can tell you right now, God loves you. God loves you before you loved Him. And the moment you said yes to Him, if you said yes to Him, then you are loved forever. And so, let me ask you, do you find yourself dearly loved? Or do you find yourself striving, being exhausted? Do you find yourself not just always falling short, always trying your hardest, and then you just mess up and you just can't figure it out, and you just become frustrated, and then you just become complacent because you're like, this is all I ever got? Is that where you find yourself, or do you find yourself at peace as dearly loved, knowing that God loves you genuinely because of who you are and who He created you to be, and because Jesus died for you, just like my guy over here shared the gospel, right? He came, He was born, He lived a perfect life, He died for us, but He didn't stay dead. He rose 3 days later so that He can defeat death for us on our behalf. And so do you find yourself sitting in that peace, that comfort? Because I can tell you I didn't. And now here's the question. You're like, man, I didn't know this was a gospel presentation. I thought this was life on mission. Well, can I tell you, you will not live out the mission that God has for you until, you won't live it out well until you find yourself as a dearly beloved child of Christ. You won't. Because everything will just come out of force. You will just find yourself going, I have to do this. Why? Because it's just part of what I'm supposed to do as a Christian. Instead of, man, I get to do this. I want to do this. I love to do this. You will find it much easier to talk. Now, here's a question. What if someone asks you, man, what's your purpose? Anybody want to be brave enough? What's your purpose? What's your purpose on this planet? What do we think our purpose is, really? To glorify God. Awesome. Tell everyone about Him. Cool. To live for Him. Awesome. Live out His will for us, and tell everyone about Jesus. Awesome. To know Him. Cool. Yeah. To be His child. Ooh, I like that.
To show others by your actions.
To show others by your actions. Awesome. So, here's what's interesting about our purpose. Oftentimes we confuse our purpose with our mission on this planet. What is our mission? If I were to ask you, what is your mission? What is God's mission for you on this planet? What would you say? Share the good news. To tell everyone about Jesus. But doesn't that sound exactly like what everyone just answered what our purpose is? So is my purpose or my mission to share the gospel? Is my purpose or my mission to do good things for Jesus? Is my purpose or my mission to live a life that I was created for in Jesus? What is that? What's the difference? Is there a difference? Because they sound very similar in the church context. And they sound ever so difficult to ask. See, when it comes back to purpose, when I ask the question, what is your purpose? You can ask the question, why do we exist? Why do we exist as human beings? Can you answer that? Why are we here? Why did God create us in the first place? Okay. Keep him company. To glorify him. To have a relationship with him. Okay, God created us out of love. I like that. Why humans exist? The question that humans have tried to answer for thousands of years. Humans have all different answers as to why we exist, which is why we have all these different religions, which is why we have all these different beliefs. Why are we here? Is it some cosmic accident? Obviously, we as believers of Jesus don't believe that to be the case. We believe that Genesis is true, and what we find in Genesis is that God created everything. God created the world, and God created everything in the world, but then something different happens as God chose to create human beings in his image, which is the only created being, only created thing in this universe that gets to bear the name of in his image is us, by the way. So you are created in the image of God, so we are image bearers. No other plant, animal, or microscopic organism gets that label as image, created in the image of God himself, which means God has special purpose for us. And so what happened was we look at Genesis 1, which is when everything was created, and we look at Genesis 2, which is when Adam and Eve got their purpose, or their calling, their mission. Hey, go out and do this, take care of stuff. Genesis 1:26 talks about telling Adam and Eve, you are rulers of this world. You are to take care of everything in it, to rule over it, right? And so what's interesting is if we look back on, man, why are we here? It's no different than when God created Adam and Eve, because why God created them, and he created them to be in a relationship with him. It says that they walked with God every single day. Can you imagine walking with the Creator himself every single day? God created humans in his image so that he can walk with us and have a relationship with us on a daily basis. And then we all know what happened in Genesis 3. Genesis 3 says, right, the forbidden fruits, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right? And so what happened is that created eternal separation, and then we lost our purpose. And we've been trying to find our purpose ever since. Please don't confuse your purpose with the mission you've been given on this planet. Your purpose is to be in a relationship with God. The Bible, we can say to glorify God. I think that's a little, like, if we want to just break it down and be more simple, if we just want to really live out, man, why do I exist? You are not an accident. It is not an accident that humans are on this planet, because it is very clear that God very purposely created us for the purpose of being in a relationship, walking with him, so that we can experience the joy and the richness of this life. That's why God created us, so that we could have a relationship with him who would take care of us, and then we ought to take care of others the way he took care of us. And then that got all messed up. But then Jesus came and restored that purpose again. But now we got to talk about, what is this workshop about? It's about our mission. But why do I care so much about your purpose? Because I believe if you switch your purpose and your mission, you will always be wandering. Because imagine if we all know the mission. Anybody recite what our Great Commission is? What is the Great Commission? Perfect. I like that. Preach the gospel, or go out and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, right? So we have a mission. We are supposed to spread the purpose that we know, right? The purpose that God goes, this was why I wanted you here, is because I wanted to be in a relationship with you. So what are we doing? Jesus comes and restores that purpose again. So that's called the gospel. And so he makes that purpose available to us. And now what's our job? Our job is to go and spread that. But now the method to the mission is anything. You pick one. Anybody loves sports? Here, raise your hand if you love sports. I love sports. I coach track at one of our high schools, and I love competition. Almost too much, not gonna lie. All right, because if you know me, you know that I hate losing. All right, losing is something I just can't handle. All right, it's bad. I have to work on it on a daily basis, and God's still working on me. It's okay. But here's the deal. So when it comes to sports, when it comes to competition, it's interesting because as I'm talking to some of my runners this year, it was interesting because they have all these tools, right? They have all these tools to go back to, right? These ones in particular are distance kids, all right? And so they run longer in the track meets, all this stuff. And so one thing that they have is they have all these tools to help them get through their race because their race is longer than everybody else's. And these tools are awesome. These tools are all scientifically proven. It's professional athletes use them. It's awesome. But what I've noticed this year is all these tools have gotten in the way of their sole mission as an athlete, which is to win, to compete in order to win. In fact, Paul tells us in his letters that he says, compete as if you're run to win the race. Run to win. So he compares this life to winning a race, to running a race and then winning. Compete as if you're trying to win. It's interesting because I'm working through all these issues over these last few months with some of my athletes, and it's all of these methods that are getting in their head as far as like, okay, but if I don't make this time, then I'm not going to get this. If I don't do this, then I'm going to be out of step. If I don't, it's all of these things. And what I've noticed is man, they've forgotten the original intent of competing, which is be competitive, which is literally to try to win. That's why we do the sport we do. It's to try to win. That's why we do races in track, is we try to win. That's why you play basketball games, is to try to win. Otherwise, we would just be practicing all the time. Practicing is to get better so that you can win. Like, it's not that hard. But it's interesting because we confuse, we skip over, it's just like in our life with Jesus, is we skip over the purpose that we have on this planet, which is to be in a relationship with Him. If we miss that, all of the methods that we do will just get lost and muddy, and we will struggle because we will just become exhausted. Because why? We were never created to just do this alone. We were never created to just go outside of God and go, God, but I'm doing all this awesome stuff for you. I'm spreading the gospel. But you missed the relationship part with me. And so this is why I care so much about why you exist in the first place. Why are you here? Is because I want you to understand, even if you walk out of here and you go, I still don't know how to share the gospel with my friends, that's fine. But if you understand more about your relationship, Ephesians 5:1, go follow God's example as dearly beloved children. If you walk away going, man, I want to be that beloved child, and you start asking questions on how does my life need to change so that I can sit and rest in God's grace and His love, then man, that's a win for me. Because I can tell you right now, we as a culture, in America especially, are so good at doing. We're so good at checking the box. We're so good at making following Jesus a job that we clock out of and clock into. We're so good at doing that because we miss the original purpose. Now, we talked about the purpose. We talked about the mission. The mission is to go out. We all have the same mission, by the way. It doesn't matter if you're a pastor or not. You all have the same command of go and make disciples. That was not specific for any one person in any one job. That was for every single person. Go out and make disciples. Doesn't matter how old you are. Doesn't matter how young you are. Doesn't matter how inexperienced you are. The moment we said yes to Jesus, we are to go and make more disciples. Right? And so now, we get to the method. The method, you have your purpose to be in a relationship with God. You have your mission to go and spread that news, the good news of Jesus making our relationship with God possible again, to go and spread that to the world. And now, to go and make disciples of that. And now how do we do that? Well, the methods are all based on what you naturally do. If you love sports, how many of you love stuff in the arts, drawing, theater, music, any of that stuff? All of that is stuff in the arts. How many of you just love school or academics in school? You're good at them. You love, any math people in here. Oh, it blows my mind. Any English people, you just love writing. You're just there. Yeah, because I'm here too. It's fine. Just kidding. I love you guys. But here's the deal: is all of those are different ways that we get to carry out our mission, right? Those are all methods. Those are all change. And just because you play baseball doesn't mean you're going to play baseball for the rest of your life. So if you make baseball your identity, then one day you're going to have an identity crisis. Just because you love to write, just because you love to paint, there's going to be a moment in your life where something happens and you can't do that anymore. If you make painting or writing or something artsy your identity, then you will have an identity crisis. But if Jesus is first, again, back to the purpose, if Jesus is first, then you will never have an identity crisis because Jesus will never change. And so, now that we got methods, now that you can use your own creative ability in whatever you do to spread the gospel. You can do that. God gave you a talent. He gave you gifts to all be different. If we were all the same in this room, if we were all what I'm doing right now, can you imagine if all of us were gifted to be able to speak in front of people all at once? We'd all just be talking and there would just be a bunch of noise. And there would be a whole lot less people just listening. And a whole lot less people going out there, because this is awesome, by the way, this circle. This is how we grow. This is called community. But there's a whole bunch of people outside of these walls that need to know their purpose, that they were created with a purpose. And it's our job to go from here, because we're all gifted and we all have different spheres of influence. We all have different circles that we're a part of every single day. And it's our job to go out and change the world. So how do we do that? Well, guess what? Clear, plain and simple, and this is how we're going to go more into our panels, is asking specific questions. But can I tell you, this isn't rocket science. How did Jesus do it? That's the best thing to ask. Okay, what would Jesus do? How would Jesus do it? All right, how did Jesus make disciples? Anybody know? How do you make disciples? Okay, by spreading the word specifically, though, how did he get his 12 disciples? He did do that, but that's not how they started.
He was personal.
He was personal? Okay, what does that mean?
He didn't just leave a note or a pamphlet saying, hey, this God exists, you should believe in him. But he said, hey, I know you, I know what you've done, but I choose to call you by your name instead of your sin. And I want to know that I'm here to help you and I'm here to save you.
Absolutely. So he's personal. That's how he called them. That's how he initially got them. So what did he do after that?
Oh.
You can answer.
He invited them to certain programs. And we thought even if you go to leaders or all the kind of people who went to the Christian
So he searched them out. He went out and he called them by name, right? He said, hey, come and follow me. But then how did he turn them into a disciple? Which, does anybody first, what does a disciple mean? That's just a word we use all the time. What does it mean? What does that word mean? Okay, follower. Yes, that's pretty much plain and simple. It means a follower, but specifically in the context of the Bible, when we translate the Greek word disciple, by the way, disciple is not just a Christian word, all right? They had disciples of all religions. They still do. All disciple means is a follower, but specifically a close follower. So the imagery that is created in the Greek that we often miss because it's English or Greek to English is it literally means to walk in the footsteps of your teacher, of your mentor. It means to follow them that closely that you are stepping in their footsteps, right behind them. And so when we talk about what it means to be a disciple and how do we ask, how did Jesus do it? Did Jesus sit them in classrooms and teach them? Yes or no? No, because they didn't have classrooms. That's pretty easy one. But Did Jesus always sit them down in a formal teaching setting and go, here you go, this is what you need to know? Not always. Jesus did teach crowds, but also they didn't have cars. And so they walked everywhere they went, which took a lot of time. So Jesus taught them on the road. There's a lot of things that are not recorded in the Bible that Jesus did. We have 3 years is said to be like Jesus' ministry time-ish, but a fraction of what Jesus did, the miracles he did, the things he taught, are actually written in Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. A fraction. And so that means that there's a whole lot of things that Jesus did with his disciples that we don't know about. Now imagine you go to restaurants, fast food places with your friends, right? That happens. You have to eat. Did it record all of the times Jesus ate with his disciples? Absolutely not. How many times have you had incredible conversations with friends late at night right before you're going to sleep? Anybody? Raise your hand. Incredible conversations? Yeah. It's mind-blowing. I don't understand why. But when you you're going to sleep and you have this super deep conversation and you're like, wow, it's 1 a.m. in the morning. Why are we having this super intellectual conversation now? I don't know. But you do. How many times have you had a great conversation in the car ride, whether you're driving or someone else is driving? Great deep conversation. Exactly. So here's the deal. There's a lot of times where Jesus, because his disciples followed him for about 3 years. And it wasn't like what we think, where it's like we meet for an hour, talk about the Bible, and then we go our separate ways, do our separate thing. No, they literally dropped everything they did to follow him. And they lived with him, they breathed the same air, they ate the same food, they went to the same restaurants. Excuse me, we didn't have those. But you get what I mean? They went places together, and here's what you need to understand creating a disciple is all about having a life worth imitating. It's all about having a life that is worth following. Paul actually tells in his letters, he tells the places he writes to, he says, follow me as I follow Christ. And so what is Paul saying? Paul is saying, I want you to follow me because I am following that closely to Christ. So follow me because you're my disciple. He's writing to these churches to go, imitate me. Now looking at your life, how many of you would actually be bold enough to tell one of your friends, hey, imitate me, because that's the way of God? Don't look around, okay? Don't judge a person like Steve, all right? You'll be like, not you. But, so here's the question is, Paul goes, and Paul wasn't perfect, he was human, Jesus is the only one who was perfect. And so Paul goes, hey, imitate me as I imitate Christ. So Paul has the audacity to go, you know what? I am following so closely the best that I can as a human, and so I want you to follow my lead. And so now maybe that's a good question to ask for you guys. When it talks about living life on mission, how do we share the gospel with others? And we're going to talk a little bit more about specifically some examples, because I know Ritchie and Sarah have some great ideas on practical things. But what I want to leave you with is going, are you living a life worth imitating for someone to follow? Meaning, is your life displaying the life that Jesus lived? Are your choices, are your words, how you interact with people around you, is that worth imitating? Is that an example of how Jesus lived? Because when it talks about making disciples, man, classes are great, doing schooling, doing education is great. Did you know you don't have to go to college and get a 4-year degree to do exactly what I'm doing right now? Don't say that. But you don't have to go and get a certain level of education to tell people about Jesus. You don't have to go and do a certain number of things in order to be certified or qualified to tell people about Jesus. I can tell you right now that I am the least qualified person that I know. I am. I mess up all the time. I do and say stuff that I shouldn't. I still pout when I lose. All right? That's a real thing. Okay? I still am not the best winner either. All right? So just don't play games with me. It's fine. But here's the deal, like I still am full of mistakes and I'm still going, man, I'm still trying to live a life worth imitating. And so what I don't want you, don't hear that just because you're struggling right now, just because life choices are not great right now for you, don't hear that it's not like it's too late and that, you know, it's over and Jesus is done with you. Can I tell you that we are all a work in progress and we always will be. And what matters is your boldness to go, you know what, I want to live for Jesus and I'm going to do it with my heart every single day. And I'm going to live my purpose, which is be in a relationship with Him. And that is first and foremost. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to tell people about my purpose because there's no greater way to evangelize, to tell people about the gospel than your story, by the way, than your life experience, than your hardships that God has turned from bad to good, from your experiences that maybe started as traumatic, but now you're looking back and you go, man, God can use this. There's no greater way to evangelize than to tell people from your story. Because you can be the smartest person in the room, and people still won't listen. It's true. Someone said earlier, Jesus used His relational ability to make disciples. Absolutely. Jesus used His ability to connect on a human being level and go, hey, I see you. I see you through all of your mistakes, through all of your flaws and failures. I see you, and guess what? You are worth it. And so now, that's all we got to do. So I'm going to invite Sarah and Ritchie here in the middle. You don't got to clap. It's fine. I'm going to invite Sarah and Ritchie. Sarah's got questions. Here's what I want to do. The next about 15 minutes, Sarah's got a few questions. And our hope is that, one, you're going to hear from other people other than just me, because I don't know everything, and other people have different life stories, and other people have different things to share on how they have reached out to others, and how, you know what, like, there's, again, like I said, there's so many different methods to evangelize. There's not one perfect way, because why? God created us all different, and with all unique abilities. So, if you want to come.
We're actually not going to sit in the middle. We're going to sit like apart in a circle. Yeah, I know.
I'm going to say
I
that.
know. No, you're part of, okay, so Oscar was half right. He's actually part of this. I actually have questions for both you and Ritchie. So you're not done talking. So if you want to sit over here. I just felt like the conversation. Do you guys want me to stand in the middle?
Yeah.
You guys can sit in the middle back to back. That's actually good. Back to back.
We can share mine. It's fine. We can say that. I'm good.
Alright, so here's the thing. I have some questions for you guys. First question, these are important. What's your favorite sports team?
What's the what?
Your favorite sports team?
Sports team?
Sports team.
Sports team. Oh, 49ers is all day.
Let's go!
Alright, can you please tell us what's your favorite sports team?
Well, it's, in case you haven't noticed, I'm a huge baseball fan. I love baseball. So the Houston Astros are my absolute favorite team. So it's fine, you can do that. That's okay. You just have to World Series to prove it. That's fine.
Alright, the first question I have for you guys, I asked AI, my brain, what students had asked. First question is, what advice would you give to someone who's super shy and is terrified and public speaking? It's very awkward.
So I used to have a lot of social anxiety. Oh, I'm Ritchie. I'm a youth pastor in Chino Valley. I used to have really bad social anxiety. Like, I couldn't speak to anybody. If you knew me now, you wouldn't believe it because I speak to everyone. But that's just because that's how awesome God is. He radically transformed me from just nothing to something. So I started to really watch. There were some people that were evangelists that I really loved and enjoyed watching and listening to. And I just loved the way they were able to engage with people. So I had a desire growing inside of me to be, not them, but to be able to share the gospel like they do. And to reach other people, to be able to reach into the communities and share the gospel. So I just began to ask God to give a boldness inside of me to speak to people and be comfortable talking to people, and that's exactly what he did. So I just spent time with God and asked him for boldness.
Awesome. This is for either one of you, but have you ever felt fake sharing the gospel? And what was that like for you?
Have I ever felt fake while sharing the gospel? I think there's been times where I felt fake by how I live my life. When I am trying to live out the example of the gospel, where I'm like, man, I know I don't believe this right now. I know that there have been times where my days have been so hard, like they've been so bad, so where I was like, man, I mean, I believe in Jesus, but I just don't believe that, his grace is good enough for me right now. That's for sure. The biggest thing to reconcile that and to live it out is we just keep one step at a time. One step moving forward, never giving up, don't quit. Because there's going to be days where, guess what, you don't feel it. And if we lived our life based on emotion, then we're on this constant roller coaster up and down. So one thing that got me through it is just take one step forward at a time. And I love what Ritchie said about the last answer is, man, ask God. There's too many times in my life where I tried to muscle my way through it because I thought I was talented enough, and instead of going, God, I just need you to give me this strength right now.
Thank you. All right, so Ritchie, you can probably answer this one. Who in your life has lived so on fire and so on mission for the gospel that it actually affected you?
I got a lot. Well, my wife was
Pick
actually
one.
one.
You're both so many. Just pick one. It's not your favorite one. Someone.
My pastor Chad, my wife, and there's just some friends of mine. I do Christian hip hop music, and I got some friends of mine that I really like, because for me, sharing the gospel is a lot more than just knowing the Word of God. It's like he was saying about how Jesus taught them by example of his life, And so when I see people who are on fire for God and are actually walking it out, living to the best of their ability to be a living example of Christ, that is got me going. So I was surrounded myself with a bunch of people who not only talk about it, but be about it throughout their days. They're going to work, they're still living for Jesus. They go to school, they're still living for Jesus. They're living for Jesus on the stage, they're living for Jesus when the doors close. So I just kind of focus on people that are actually walking it out, because, I don't want to be a fake Christian. I know I'm going to make mistakes. I know I'm going to fall short in a lot of areas of my life, but I want to be a living reflection of Christ in every single area of my life. How I pastor, how I parent, how I friend, how I work, how I everything, right? So those are the people I look up to, are the people that are actually walking it out. I want to see their life be an example of Christ.
That's awesome. What would you guys say, because sharing the gospel is difficult, right? Like, it's challenging, but there's also so much joy in it. And like sharing testimonies and sharing stories with one another is so great because it's encouraging. But what do you say to the student or to the person that's like, well, my testimony or my story just isn't enough to share with people that actually share the gospel with? So how would you speak into that? How would you encourage, what would you say? Austin, here you go.
I want to say this. I want to encourage everybody in this room. There is not one person in this room that does not have an amazing testimony. Everybody has an amazing testimony. Sometimes you might think, well, there's nothing great about me, right? There's nothing special. I have a crazy testimony. I was facing the death penalty at 18 years old for murder. And I spent 3.5 years in jail facing the death penalty for my crimes. And people will say, man, that's crazy. That's an insane testimony. I've never experienced it. I wish I had a testimony like that. But how many of you guys have ever been brokenhearted? How many of you guys have ever felt lost, confused, didn't know who you were, felt like you were ready to give up? That is something that a lot of people that you guys are around have the same thing. And how you find your way out of that by trusting in God is an amazing testimony. Because God will transform that moment of depression. God will transform that idea of suicide. God will take you away from drug addictions. God will take you away from depression. God will give you a life that you never thought was possible. Something, He will take you out of an area that makes you feel like you are so overwhelmed and drowning, and pull you up and deliver you and set you free. And that in itself is a testimony. So how many of you guys have been free from that? How many of you guys now are walking and experiencing joy from a place of darkness? You all have an awesome testimony right there. You guys should be sharing that.
Thanks, that was good. That was great. Do you guys have any questions for the people here? Yeah. I'll give you a second, because it took me a second to come up with these questions, guys. Liberty, what's the question?
I guess, how do you, when you see yourself struggling in an area, obviously go into prayer, but how do you watch yourself, I guess, kind of keep yourself from going over it, or going into that position, even like pride or that pain, or like letting yourself try for the pain, like how do you, not only prayer, but what else do you do to grow the word of God?
I think one of the long lost things in our culture is just radical accountability and community. I think one of the things that we're straying away from in just culture-wise is like, I don't need others, I got me, myself, and I, and that's who I rely on. I know that one thing in particular, like, sin can only grow in darkness, and temptation is strongest when you're alone. And so, but what sin will always do is it will always cause you to isolate, and it will tell you the biggest lie of all time, that you are alone, and that you are the only one who struggles with this. Or you're the only one your age, with your family background, who struggles with this. And that is the biggest lie that keeps people from being radically honest and accountable to people like peers or even mentors. And you have to fight. You have to fight for that accountability. It's not just going to be handed to you. You have to fight to go to people, whether it's peers or whether it's someone you trust, maybe they're older. You have to fight for that, because people aren't just going to automatically, like, magically know that you're struggling until you fight for that accountability.
I 100% agree with that. Actually, you know, like you said, accountability is important. You know, surrounding yourself with people that are going to lift you up and encourage you to go in the right direction. Being alone is a dangerous place sometimes. I know there's some areas where I struggled at, where being alone was the worst place I had to be. And when I caught myself when I was starting to backslide, I would instantly, I'd go out for a walk, I'd go call a friend, hey, you want to go have some coffee, you want to eat somewhere, you want to hang out or whatever. But, you know, you'd be surprised if you were just willing to open up and trust the people you're around, how many of them are actually struggling with the same thing. And being able to address it and attack it and lean on each other is awesome. Community is huge.
Thanks, guys. One more question for you guys. I'm trying to talk to it. But it's going to come back to me in just a second. What would you say, like, how would you speak into, let's say, you're someone who has made according to you their whole life, like, you have a reputation, right? You come in and Jesus has transformed your life so radically, and now we're tasked with sharing the gospel. Like, how do we even have the courage to do that when so many of our friends and families have known us a specific way?
I will say that I am the black sheep of my family because I live the way I am now. If I was doing drugs and gangbanging like I used to, I'd be accepted. But because I'm not, and because I choose to live this way, I'm actually the black sheep. But, so it's not popular in my family. All my family are drug dealers or gang members or just living lives that are not satisfactory at all. And I'm actually the one who's like, you know, I'm always being attacked. Oh, you're a Christian, you think you're better than me. I'm like, no, I'm not trying to push my life on you at all. I'm actually just trying to do this because I remember where I was, and right now I do a lot better than I was then. So I guess just keep pushing. You know, the thing I've learned mostly in my walk is going from being what I was to where I am now is a lot of people expect me to fail so they can disprove the power that God has in my life. And just by being consistent, I've been able to break down a lot of walls of the people who thought that it was just on a joke and a gimmick. But I mean, I'm 15 years saved now, and I am nowhere near the person I was before. So that's just evidence in itself. And it actually speaks volumes for the gospel. I don't even have to preach it, just keep living. You know what I mean?
Can I just real quick, just making this super, super practical, because I think a lot of us have in mind that we got to go downtown tomorrow and we got to get every single random person we meet and start reciting the gospel to them. I think it's so much more practical than that. While that is absolutely okay, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think for a lot of us, we're turned away by going well, I don't do that. That's not me. That's not my personality. Can I tell you, there's plenty of people that you encounter on a regular basis that don't know God, that are having a bad day, that are taking it out on you, or taking it out on people around you. And you know what's crazy is by just seeing the person the way Jesus sees them, and by actually encountering them and interacting with them, they, in a way that God would, that is going to change their life. Could you imagine if the person who is super, super forward and rude to you, whether it's in a public, like a store, a restaurant, fast food, whatever it is, could you imagine if you treated them with kindness, dignity, and respect? Instantly. Like that was just you. You know, they yelled at you, called you something. What if you treated them with respect and dignity first? Or, better yet, you go to school and someone, we're all good at mouthing off and just instantly saying things that we regret and stuff. What if instead of fighting back, you treat the person, your peer, someone your age, with dignity, respect, with honor? What if you did that first before coming back with a really snarky, sarcastic remark that just tears them down? There's part of evangelism, spreading the gospel. Remember, spreading the gospel is the good news of Jesus. What is the good news of Jesus? That he came and died so that our purpose is back again. What is our purpose? So to live a life in a relationship with God forever. That is our purpose, to be restored, to be whole, to be free. And the person in front of you who is not free, whether they're a peer, whether they're an adult, a parent, a sibling, a guardian, whatever it is, if they would, could you imagine, again, like Ritchie was saying, you're living the gospel more than you're preaching the gospel. And so what if evangelism from all of us became, man, I'm really going to work on treating the person in front of me with honor first, before how fast can I tear them down with my words? How fast can I tear them down with my fists, my actions, my whatever it is? What if our goal coming out of this was, man, the next step of evangelism, remember we switched up the room, disrupted. What if we disrupted the idea of evangelism, and instead of going, man, how do I speak better? So, man, how do I actually live and my actions be better? What if we all collectively agreed to come out of this room, and then now, starting now, because remember, we're never too far gone. It's never too late to change. In fact, we're human beings. God made us to change. God made us to grow. And so, what if for now we go, man, speaking the gospel is awesome. There's so much power in that. And that's part of reading your Bible, getting to know, someone said that earlier, getting to know deeply the God who loves you and what he has to say about you so that you can say it about others. But what if, starting now, because we can all do this, our actions change when we start to honor the person in front of us? Younger, older, sibling, parents, teacher, friends, enemy. What if we started to do that and now see the world change in front of your eyes?
That's good, this is awesome. All right, guys, well, that is our time. Thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions, we'll be here to answer any kind of talk and chat with you, but we'll be around as well. Yeah.
Can we get the chairs moved back, please, to where they were?
If you can please